This propane cylinder has 400 grams of propane in it. And that lasted me 11 minutes when I was doing refrigeration with it. So what I did was took all of these and I put them right here in this. Coincidentally, that's 400 grams of nitrous oxide inside it. So the thing about that is that I'm still having ideas. And the idea I'm having now is an idea about this. Because if I modify this just a little bit, which really won't take much work, it's mostly just changing this thing. Hang up my nitrous oxide bottle. Then I can try refrigerating with nitrous oxide. Now we know that I reached what, minus 32.5 C using propane, which was a pretty good correlation to the prediction that I would get. So I don't see any reason why I can't get down to minus 80 using this. And I'm really interested to see if I can get colder. So we'll reconfigure this thing just slightly and fill it up with a few more thermocouples and see what we can get. So I'm going to try this experiment of refrigeration with nitrous oxide. I'm going to walk you through my setup here. That's my supply tank. It has 383 grams of nitrous oxide in it, going down to the same box that I used for my propane experiment. I tried to see if I could pressurize this box using this gauge, but I can't. So it's just leaking like a sieve. Here's my instrument cluster. It's the same thing that I used in the propane experiment. The big difference here is that this is, I don't know, $30 or $40 worth of nitrous oxide as opposed to $3 of propane, and I'm going to try to keep it. So coming out of my coil is this line that runs over here to a manifold. I've got a balloon reservoir, and I've got that coming up to my pump, and I'm going to try to pump that nitrous oxide back into another cylinder. You can see that I've got a lot of cooling ready to go because I don't have time to stop in the middle. I've just got to keep going as long as this valve is open and I am running refrigerant. I need to be able to continue to collect it, which is why I've got all that ice ready to go. All of my low pressure joints are sealed with rubber cement and tape. I've got new balloons, so everything hopefully is as fail-safe as possible. That is a balloon full of CO2, which is running through this needle valve and into the box, because in theory I should be able to get a temperature low enough to produce dry ice out of that CO2. So as soon as I start cooling the box, I'm going to turn that CO2 flow on, and that's why I was trying to pressurize the box, which turns out I can't do. So let's get everything set up, turn on some cameras, and take it away. So away we go. Turn on my CO2, but turn it off at the needle valve. Turn this on. Okay, hopefully we're not about to lose anything in a giant explosion here. My reservoir is open. Looks like everything's ready to go. We'll start. We'll just start letting some nitrous oxide come in. And we're going to watch the valve in the chamber to start with. There goes the pressure and there goes the temperature in the valve. And my bag is starting to fill up. This is really too cold for my valve. It really can't take it. I have achieved the coldest temperature I've ever gotten. I'm at minus 41. So my box is reading minus 52. And I've got CO2 flowing into the box. I'm thinking maybe I'm not going to get quite cold enough to make dry ice. It's going to kind of let things roll here. I may be out of nitrous oxide. I don't appear to be flowing anymore, which may just be that my valve is iced up. I appear to have just used up all of my refrigerant fairly quickly, which is somewhat disappointing. Well, I think we're going to have to cut the experiment there and accept the fact that I got down to about minus 60 in one portion of the device, although I wasn't able to actually make dry ice that I can observe. Let's go back. Well, I think our next choice then is to see what the... that's definitely cold in there. So I think that actually might be there is a little bit of dry ice right there, because it's not very much, but it's not water ice because it's not wet. Well, it's a little bit of water ice, but it's also doing a little bit of smoking. So I did produce a small quantity of dry ice, not nearly as much as I hoped I would. Good first start though. This is a slideshow that shows the different temperatures of the different parts of the object at 30-second intervals for the first 7 minutes of the run. The first one here is the valve, which takes a sudden drop and becomes very low, and then rockets back up and assumes a higher temperature. I think most likely that initial drop is gas actually evaporating inside the valve before it runs and turns around the corner and starts evaporating inside the jet. The gray graph is the bottom of the chamber, which goes down very gradually and slowly, reaches a nice perigee at around, what is that, 5.5 minutes or so. The coil likewise takes a gradual decline down to its lowest point at, again, about, looks like it's actually about 6.5 minutes. The exhaust actually takes a sudden dump, which I think is probably related to the drop in the valve. A lot of gas suddenly whooshing through, but then gradually climbs up as I learned how to moderate and not overcool the exhaust. Lastly, we have the box, which sort of gradually comes down in a nice sort of moderate graph, bottoming out at minus 53.8, 6 minutes into this run, and then warming up as I ran out of nitrous oxide. The one graph that's not on here is the top of the chamber. The top of the chamber was closest to the nozzle of any of the sensors. In fact, it was pretty much in contact with the nozzle. That thing stopped working about 2 minutes into this run, and then it came back on at about 12 minutes, and it was at minus 60 degrees. So I suspect that may be part of the reason why I lost gas flow, is that it got really, really cold up there in the nozzle, and that probably caused the gas to stop flowing. Let's do a quick post-mortem on what we did here in our first attempt to refrigerate with nitrous oxide. This mechanism over here, which was intended to capture and save the waste nitrous, I captured 166 grams of the 383 grams of nitrous oxide that was in this device. That's obviously a mighty low yield. Turns out, though, that my reservoir still had 168 grams in it. So between those two, there's 334 grams of the 383 that I started with. So I lost 59 grams. So if you think about it, if there's 168 grams left in my reservoir, then I sent 215 grams through the system, captured 166 of those grams, which means that I lost 59 grams, which is a 27% rate of loss. Most of it probably through the decompression valve here that I have to operate in order to keep my pump working, because every time I have to stop it, I have to decompress the system, and I'll bet I'm losing a lot of gas through that. So I have some thoughts on that. I can probably replace this with some sort of a valve that actually vents the system back into the low pressure system so that I can save the nitrous oxide that way. So that's one thing I can do. The second thing I know is that this nitrous oxide inlet system let me down either here or here. This thing's been pretty reliable in my experiments with dry ice, so I'm suspecting that my problem was here at this valve, particularly because this didn't get cold, but this valve got really pretty cold. I could think of two things that could have happened here. One of them could have been water. I'm pretty sure my system's pretty dry, but I can't guarantee it's completely dry. The other thing that I do know is that I've used these to hold CO2, and it wouldn't surprise me because this thing here got down to about 60 degrees below 0°C. It really wouldn't surprise me if I didn't form some dry ice in my inlet gas, which then plugged up my system, either at this valve or at the little jet that I'm using down on the inside of the chamber. The only thing I can think to do then is to completely purge all of my gas and start over again with clean nitrous oxide that doesn't have CO2 in it, because both of these tanks have been used to hold CO2. And then I'll have to give it another shot. The other thing I think I want to do before I try this again is figure out how to get the stuff that I'm pumping into my salvage tank back to my reservoir tank so that I've got a closed loop system, which would be essentially a refrigerator at that point, since this would sort of be subbing in as the compressor for the refrigerator. So I think I've got to figure out a way to do that. So that'll take me a little while. Probably won't be any more on this subject for a little bit, but I hope you'll feel free to like and subscribe. If you don't want to, that's okay. And tell your friends to take a look or subscribe if they want. And again, if they don't want, that's fine too. Otherwise, let's call it an episode. And thanks very much for watching, and have a great day.